there's a formula that we have researched and understood that if people begin to apply the formula and make inward changes, that if they get really good at it, they'll begin to see effects in their outer world. Old model of the way we view not only the human being, but the nature of reality is antiquated. It's old. It's based on principles that are solid to a certain degree, but there's more to reality than we think. So if you combine quantum physics with a little neuroscience, with a little neuroendocrinology, a little psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, all of those sciences really give us the opportunity to explore possibility. And I think that when you put all of those pieces together, the knowledge in terms of a model shows that mind and matter are very closely connected. And so then if mind has an effect on matter, how do we get good at beginning to notice effects in the work that we do? So knowledge then becomes the forerunner to experience. And I think science now is the contemporary language of mysticism. And I think science is what demystifies the mystical. So it gives people the opportunity then to understand what they're doing and why. And when you understand the what and the why, the how gets easier. And I think that this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think this is a time in history to know how. And information is so readily available, Alexander, to so many people that we don't need an authority, a priest, a teacher, any authority to give us information. We have access to information. So in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. So people are becoming empowered by knowledge. And every time you learn something new, you have a greater sense of awareness about yourself and the world around you. And awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So there's a change in energy that's going on the planet, and people are more informed. And it's an exciting time because they're no longer looking at reality in the same way. They're starting to question, well, if this person has healed themselves of a chronic health condition by changing their thoughts, their feelings, their lifestyle, and I see evidence that many other people are doing it, well, the old model then no longer has a foundation. So it will work for people who need something outside of them to change their inner state. But this new model of reality is about changing your inner state independent of anything outside of you. And that gives people a tremendous amount of power. And we're seeing results because of it. Einstein and Planck began experimenting with subatomic particles. And what they started to do is agitate or put energy into an electron and disturb it. And they expected that electron to fall towards the nucleus of the atom, just like an apple would fall towards the center of the earth from a tree. And that's a Newtonian model of reality. If you know the position and you know the distance, for the most part, you can determine how long it's going to take to hit the ground. It's very predictable. But when they disturbed the electrons, that's not what happened. They didn't behave like the very large planets and apples in the objective world. The electrons gained energy and lost energy, gained energy, lost energy, and they started appearing and disappearing. And when they started to look to measure the electron, everywhere they looked for it, it appeared. So all of a sudden, there was this kind of relationship between mind and matter, so implicitly connected that it's difficult to separate the two. So then, in the quantum model of reality, you have matter, which is the nucleus of the atom. You have electrons, photons appearing and disappearing. But you also have what's called a wave function, which is that invisible cloud of energy that's all potential. The electron could appear anywhere. And so matter is both a particle and a wave. It's both matter and energy. So then, if subjective mind has an effect on the objective world, the next question is, why is it only working for the very tiny, like subatomic particles, and not for the very large, like events in our lives? Well, the question is, maybe we just have to get better at observing and paying attention. So the quantum field then is this invisible field of energy and information that exists beyond this space and time. There's no bodies there, there's no people, there's no matter, there's no things, there's no places, and there isn't even time. It's one infinite field, a fertile field, a void of everything physical or material, but where all possibilities exist. Now, to the materialists, they would say, well, I can't see it, but just because you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I think most people spend the majority of their life focusing their attention on matter. And when we react to dangers or threats in our lives, when we turn on the very primitive nervous system that puts us in survival because we're under stress, we narrow our focus more on matter. And so we habituate. We get stuck in keeping all of our attention on our bodies, all of our attention on all the elements, the people and things and places in our outer world, and we're always trying to anticipate or predict the future based on the past. And that's the world of Newtonian physics. And in this realm of space and time, in order for us to get what we want, we have to move our body through space from one point of consciousness to another, and it takes time. So now, we only have a certain number of resources when we're matter trying to change matter. We have to compete, we fight for it, we control, we manipulate, we try to predict it, we force it, because we're matter trying to change matter. And people spend their whole lives living in lack, living in separation, and trying to get what they want. Then how do we then begin to use the field as a way to begin to produce greater effects on the nature of reality? Because if you look at some of the science, we would think that matter is emitting a field. There's a radiant field around matter, and that's true. But in effect, it's not matter that's emitting the field, it's the field that's actually slowing down in frequency and creating matter. So then if you create from the field, you should be able to produce greater effects in matter. So then how do we do that? Well, our research shows that where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So if all of your attention is invested in this three-dimensional reality, you got to play by the rules of Newtonian physics, and it's going to take time. But what if you could take all of your attention off your body, all your attention off all the people in your life, all the things, all the places, and time itself? As you begin to change your attention and disinvest your attention out of this three-dimensional reality, then in a sense, then, if you did that properly, not only would you become pure consciousness, you would be an awareness in a void of anything physical. Now you're moving closer to this field. And that field, called the quantum field, you can't experience with your senses. It's a reality that exists beyond your senses. You could only experience it with your awareness. And that field is the realm of consciousness, of frequency, of energy, of thought, of possibility. And so then when a person can linger in this place as an awareness without a face, without a body, without a name, without a disease, without a diet, without a name, without a culture, without a past, without an identity, and become pure consciousness, now they're beginning to allow themselves to connect to this field of information. How much of our waking day do we put our attention on the field or on energy, and how much of our waking day do we put our attention on objects and material matter? And for most people, all of their attention is on matter. So then it takes practice, it takes effort, it takes awareness to overcome yourself, to overcome your identity. And yet, our research shows that there's an elegant moment that we could actually predict on a brain scan in real time when a person's about ready to get beyond themselves. The moment they start disconnecting from their body and their environment and time and get beyond space and time, the brain starts to get highly organized because their awareness now is connecting to this field. And that field is a unified field. It's the very energy that unifies everything physical. It's all the forces of nature that has some effect in creating order in the three-dimensional reality. So it must be an intelligence, it must be a consciousness. So we teach people how to get to that place, and when they're in that place where they're nobody, no one, no thing, no where, and no time, then they have to then, as an awareness, connect to a frequency, to energy. And as they do that, they begin to feel more connected to something greater and less separate from everyone and everything. Our senses fool us into separation. There's me here and there's you there. There's me here and there's a plant there. There's me here and my dreams way over here. But in this place, when you start to connect during meditation, that people would say, well, I don't believe in the quantum field. I don't know, I've never experienced it. It doesn't exist. And I would say to them, well, If you don't have your attention on your nose, it doesn't exist for you either. But the moment you put your attention on your nose, it exists. It's always been there, but you didn't have any awareness on it. So the same thing applies to this field. So what happens is when people start to connect to this field, this unifying field, they start feeling more whole and less separate. In other words, they feel more connected and less lack. So they start feeling like they already have the very thing that they want. Now, when you're in a place called the quantum field where thought is real, and you feel like you already have what you're dreaming about or what your dreams are, then you don't have to try. You don't have to force. And creating from the field begins to produce changes in three-dimensional reality. Now, I'm at the point in my life where I'm waking up in my dream that I never thought when I started this journey that I would be witnessing some of the crazy and wonderful things that are happening for people in our community that have to do with instantaneous healings, where they're healing from blindness. Deaf people are hearing, tumors are disappearing, stage 4 cancers are going away, Parkinson's disease, Hashimoto's syndrome, very serious brain injuries and brain conditions reversed in a week-long event. And it would mean then, the closer they get to this unified field, then the shorter amount of time it should take for it to appear in their lives. And so, if it's happening in that amount of time, then the person is now creating from the field instead of from matter. And so, we're starting to see mystical experiences that transcend language for people. People are healing from childhood scars that they didn't even know they had. They're creating new jobs, new relationships, new opportunities. Their dreams are coming true, and they're beginning to understand there's a science to the process of manifesting reality. And I'm happy to say that we're doing it, and that people are starting to do it. A lot of trial and error, a lot of study, a lot of long hours in my attempt to connect. But I'm just the type of person, and I've always been this way, that I love to dovetail concepts. I love to unify principles. I like to connect the dots. And if the dots don't connect, I can't sleep. It just doesn't work for me. So for me, my interest at one point when I had my own life change was I started studying spontaneous remissions. People that were sick and they were getting worse or they were staying the same, and they were using all kinds of treatments, conventional and unconventional, and then all of a sudden they got better, like they just got better. So I wanted to know what the cause was that produced that effect, and although there were certain things that had to do with changes in lifestyle, matter to matter, the common things that they had that produced their significant changes had mostly to do with mind. And so that started my journey in demystifying the process. At that time, there wasn't a lot of people really challenging convention in that way. But when I had my own personal healing and started looking at all these people that were having healings, I couldn't go to the textbooks that were the basic mechanistic view of the way things happened, because the answers weren't there. So I had to look at the quantum model of reality, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, and what genes do, and genes make proteins, and proteins create structure and function in the body. And so I had all these, I was juggling all these plates, I was spinning them all, trying to keep them all going and trying to build this model of understanding back in the late 1980s, in the early 1990s. I had moments, a lot of perseverance, a lot of effort, a lot of trying. And I learned a lot about surrender in the last 20 years or so, because surrender is trusting in an outcome. And when you're in the field, you don't have to try, because if you're in the field and you're trying, you're gonna have more reasons to try. It's this delicate balance between intention and surrender. Intention is getting clear on what you want when you're in the field, and surrender is letting go and allowing and trusting a greater mind. When I started connecting, I had a lot of coherence, I had a lot of peace, my heart started opening, I felt this subtle form of connection and love, and then every now and then I would get the prize. Every now and then the door would open and my nervous system would become electric. And I don't have the words to describe it, except it was the most orderly, coherent, electric feeling that love would not be the word, because people think love is chemical. love for your child, a love for your puppy, a love for your partner, love for your car, but this is not like that. That's coming from inside of you, and the moment you have this feeling, you know that there's some awareness that's greater than you that is doing it, or at least you're having the experience with. And you only need really one taste of that. And it's the sweetest wine you'll ever drink in your life. And then your whole life is about, how do I do that again? So you become less interested in all the preoccupations that happen outside of us. I think it's an evolution. So my experience now of my connection to the field, when I have those elegant moments, am so awakened by that energy. It's so wonderful that I think to myself, there just can't be any more love to experience than that until the next experience. And then there's more. And all of a sudden, you're developing a relationship with this intelligence within you. You want to commune with it. You want to make time for it. You want to connect with it. Just like any relationship, you want to be present with it. You want to experience with it. You want to dream with it. You want to confide in it. You want to surrender your problems to it. It begins to become a love affair. And people are beginning to understand that that is the resource that causes them to feel so whole that they no longer want anything. And I think that's a good place to be.